everyone to the Ferndale Virtual Summit. So my name is Ryan Myers-Johnson, and I have the honor of facilitating tonight's session, Unpacking Development. And the planned Ferndale Summit is going to be a 2-day deep dive into topics of critical importance to the future of Ferndale, and will involve sessions focusing on development, climate change, equity, and more. For tonight's session, Unpacking Development, you will hear from subject matter experts, civil servants, and most importantly, you. This session is about hearing from you, talking to you, and really unpacking your thoughts, feelings, and dreams. As I mentioned, my name is Ryan, and I'm a member of the Planned Ferndale team focusing on community engagement. However, tonight I will also be joined by the rest of the design team, Jordan Twardy, who is with the City of Ferndale Community and Economic Development Director, Justin Lyons, Planning Manager with City of Ferndale, Kathleen Duffy with Smith Group as planner, and Alex Huff as well, a Smith Group planner. And additionally, as you noted, this meeting is going to be recorded, and throughout the session, there's going to be a lot of time for you to talk and give feedback. But while we're giving presentations, please feel free to use the chat and take notes as well. And just to go over a little bit of our sort of rules of engagement around how things are going to go today, we'll talk more about this before we go into our breakout groups. But overall, we want you to be thinking about taking space, making space, and focusing on productive conversations. And I think we're going to go into this a little bit deeper when we get to the small groups. So without further ado, I am excited to hand the mic over to Mayor Melanie Piana, who is a community champion and a seasoned public servant with specific expertise in urban planning, mobility, transportation, economic development, and climate resiliency. So please take it away, Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you to Justin and Jordan and our planning chair, our planning commissioner, Michelle Foster, who's on here as well, and the entire team that is helping us build our ambitious plan of the master land use plan and our climate action plan and the Parks and Rec plan, what we affectionately call Plan Ferndale. I really just want to say thank you for everybody to participating in tonight's event and throughout the week. Technically, we're just getting started with engagement, and this is going to be, engagement's going to happen over a few months. But I just really wanted to say that development, I know, is a difficult topic in Ferndale and always causes tension when a new development is happening in a neighborhood or along Woodward. And City Council has set some strategic direction around long-term viability and sustainability, and leaning into or leading with equity and climate resiliency. And this is really a new way of approaching our strategic priorities and how Ferndale is going to grow. And, you know, we manage every day, we manage change as city officials, as individuals in our own lives. And we have to manage the infrastructure we inherited and making it safer and more sustainable and more cost effective to maintain in the future. And part of the master planning process is going through how do we do that together. And Ferndale is a vibrant and welcoming community because we've changed and evolved more rapidly in the past 20 years, and it's not because we've stood still. So we are going to continue to change in the future. And so we really need your ideas and thoughts and feedback about how we're going to do that going forward in our plans. So I just want to say thank you for being here, spending your evening with us. It's important, and I will be listening throughout, and just glad everybody wants to be a part of Ferndale's future. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's get started. Thanks to Ryan and Mayor Piana for setting the stage. My name is Kathleen Duffy with Smith Group, and I'm going to launch us tonight with some background information on the planning process Like Mayor Piana said, these are 3 plans that are in the process of being updated, and this is just the very beginning of the process. We've been meeting with the steering committee over the summer, and we appreciate all of you from the steering committee that are here with us tonight to help set the priorities and start to think about how we wanted to best engage with you all. And this is just the beginning. So we'll be coming back for more feedback later this winter and hoping for a draft plan early in the spring. As part of this, a master plan or master land use plan and the Parks and Rec plan are updated every 5 years. But what's different this time around is the addition of a climate action plan. So integrating all of these plans into one policy document is our task at hand. And we as consultants are here to help shepherd the process, help provide some guidance on where we've helped other communities with similar endeavors. None quite this exciting and robust as what Ferndale's trying to do all at once. And so we're excited to help shepherd this process along, but ultimately it's your plan as a community. So those from city staff here, elected officials, appointed officials, we met with the Planning Commission and City Council back in September, and it's really about what the public's vision is. So we're really excited to get your feedback. So tonight's the first of 3 sessions. We wish we could be in person doing this around a table and being together, but for safety's sake, we are keeping it virtual. But our hope is we're recording tonight so that we can play this back for people who couldn't join us tonight. And they also will have the opportunity to participate in the exercises via an online survey. And we'll be plotting big boards and placing them in City Hall and the library, we hope, coming up. So stay tuned for that and direct your friends if you have fun tonight and want to get more people's input. We hope you'll join us again. If you're able, tomorrow we'll be talking about equitable open space from 3 to 5 at the same Zoom link, and then climate action from 6 to 8. So the same time as tonight, tomorrow night will be on climate action. Stay tuned to everything keep yourself abreast of the process at planferndale.com. That'll take you right to the website on the city's webpage where you can keep posted on what's next and what next steps are. So as we said, this fall has been all about starting to get input. So in addition to the community summit, we're also going to have a number of other opportunities how you can participate. So there's an online discussion board via the Plan Ferndale website. So we've got some conversation starters on there, but we would love for you to start your own forum topics and kind of dive in on some of the issues on each of the different plans that we're updating. It's really meant to be a collaborative, at your own pace, at your own time, meaningful conversation between residents and stakeholders in the city. We're also hosting mobile workshops, little mobile input exercises, and I recognize some of our facilitators are here as well on the call tonight. So if you are interested in having someone from the city or steering committee come to your regularly scheduled meetings, we're doing some in person, but focusing on virtual, they can give a quick overview to your group about what the plan is, or they can dive in deeper with you for a couple of hours to discuss in deep detail. We have an exercise, a little game on evaluating priorities to help facilitate discussion around priorities for the future for Ferndale. So check it all out on the Plan Ferndale website. You can submit a little request on there to request someone from the steering committee, one of our facilitators, to come and present to you. Stay tuned. We'll be posting online surveys there. We're going to try and do a paper survey as well for those that can't or are less comfortable participating virtually. And then, like I said, we'll be coming back to you in the winter time, so after the new year, with some draft strategies. So we're going to take this fall and through the holidays to get input and really hear what you have to say and try to organize it all for you in the winter and make sure we heard you correctly. And then our goal is to adopt all these plans later on in the spring. Here are all of those different ways that you can get involved, again, on planferndale.com. This is just an example quickly of that discussion board. You can respond to the different topics. on either a topic specific to the Parks and Rec plan, land use and development topic, or climate action. We'll post little announcements there, and we'll periodically be in there posting questions. You can click on new topic and start your own topic. It's very simple and pretty user friendly, and so stay tuned for that. Our first survey that is going through the finalization process, and we hope to get launched later this week or early next week, is an online survey for the Parks and Rec update. So stay tuned if that's something you want to chime in on. We'll have other surveys coming along the way as well. So just always check out that planferndale.com website. So as we mentioned, it's 3 different plans, and the benefit of doing these all together is to have a closer alignment. Previously, the master plan and the Parks and Rec plan were adopted together, but by integrating the climate action plan this time, we wanted to shake things up a bit on how we're going to push things forward into the future. And so that framework for how we're thinking about all of these things together is in these 3 different divisions of people, place, and systems. So understanding the utter importance of what defines Ferndale are its people, are its residents, are people like you that are joining us on this call, and prioritizing the city's commitment to equity and inclusion, and all the recommendations that come out of what it's like to be a resident and to participate fairly in the decision-making process as a community. Place is really the heart and soul of the land use master plan, thinking about what it's like to be able to access spaces and have a safe place to live, work, play, go to school. And systems really is going to be getting more at all of the different city services and infrastructure that's provided, but also a lot more of our climate action, making sure that we're emphasizing sustainability and resiliency in all the city's decisions. So with that, I'm going to toss it to Alex, who's going to take it one step further and get a little bit deeper into what this means for development.
Thanks, Kathleen. So I'm just going to kind of lay out a little bit what we're going to talk through in our groups. So the next slide is just outlining these kind of big discussion topics, going through a little bit of an introduction, getting you familiar, if you're not already, with the development process and some of the things we're going to be talking about. And then we've identified 4 big themes that continue to come up as priorities for the city of Ferndale when it comes to talking about development. And those are affordable housing, character, parking, mobility, and access, kind of that big bucket of how we move and how we access sites. And then stormwater and green space. And then we will break out into discussion groups to talk about these big themes. So the next slide, I don't intend you to read all of this, but we just wanted to kind of set the stage and talk about, we are starting with your master plan from 2017, and you're also updating your parks plan as well. But the master plan outlined this kind of vision for Ferndale that included these 4 principles of progress, equity, sustainability, and resilience. So starting from there, the next slide shows some revisions that we've been working on in partnership with the Plan Ferndale Steering Committee, as well as feedback from City Council and also Planning Commission. So looking at those kind of 4 core values, but then adding values such as inclusive, healthy, thriving, connected. So these are really working definitions that we've developed. And so I also encourage you after this session to go to that planferndale.com, and we will put these draft definitions up on the discussion boards for you to evaluate and add to as well. So that just provides us with a nice context. And Kathleen did mention those mobile input sessions and the priority sort. So that's kind of what we're showing over there in that photo there. But in addition to values, we also have things that are kind of our priorities that maybe overlap or intersect or become more specific to some of our vision and values. But I think the piece that we really want to hit home and touch on is that that the priorities and what matters most isn't going to be the same for everyone. And we do have to put ourselves in the shoes of others, particularly those that are representing non-dominant social groups. So thinking about, how priorities may differ based on your age, based on your race, ethnicity, your ability, all sorts of different identities, lived experiences, education levels. And so I think this is just a critical question for us as we focus our conversations on how will these things impact the way we develop policies, strategies, and actions moving forward to create more equitable outcomes. And so the next slide, we're starting to get more into this space of development. And so I think this is our way of talking about trade-offs, that you have commitments, things that we've, targets that we've set, guiding principles that we've identified. You also have these priorities that may be different depending on who you are or where you are in the community. Also with this ideas about timing, about when makes sense in terms of priority. And you're trying to balance these things with the resources and the realities of what the city has at hand in terms of budget, in terms of time, tools, the capacity of staff, and also the control of the city, because some things may not be something that we can regulate, but we have to encourage. So looking at our partnerships, and it's really just all a balancing act, that we want all of these things holistically, but may not be able to achieve them with every single project or initiative. And so that's what the next slide starts to get at. So it's kind of this relationship between the system, that overall citywide or regional goals that we might have, but then what we're able to achieve with a particular site or initiative. So we may not be able to achieve all of our project goals or our big priorities. And it's really, again, that balancing act of what we've established as a vision, our processes, guidelines, regulations, and such. So I just think that that's a good foundation. Leading us into, Justin's going to walk us through some kind of development 101 specific to where Ferndale's been and how you operate day to day.
Thanks, Alex. Again, I'm Justin Lyons, planning manager for the city. So I started working with the city right around the time of the last master plan. So it's kind of been interesting to see some of those policies and projects shift and change throughout the time when that plan was being adopted. So this is really just a snapshot of, there has been a lot of development projects, busy planning commission meetings, construction around the city, probably obviously before 2015, but this is kind of a snapshot of just how city policy can respond to development. So there was some ordinance amendments back in 2015 that kind of focused on Woodward and focused on planning for transit and zoning that connects to transit. Around that time and shortly after, there were a couple of bigger multifamily projects on East 9 Mile and West 9 Mile that were approved. There was a senior living project on Woodward called the James that was approved. And so I think in going through that process, the community and the planning commission said, these are things we need to keep in mind as part of the master plan. There's some things we like about these projects, obviously, but there's some other things that we have heard from the community, that we should build into the zoning ordinance going forward. So after that, there was some other, obviously, housing developments proposed, and some constructed, some not. Parkdale Towns being one of them, which is sort of is on the former Taft School site down by Garbett Park. Again, a project where some things did meet community goals and some good portions of that, and other aspects that we'll get into in a little bit that led to some policy changes. So I would say after the master plan, there were a number of things from the inclusive housing policy that city council adopted to updating our tree canopy ordinance and study, as well as updating some of the other zoning districts for more walkable, I would say, and mixed use focused development. So there's a number of things after that. Even because of that inclusive housing policy, there was a project approved earlier this year, 503 East 9 Mile, that is 100% affordable housing. And so that sort of leads us here today. So that's really just a snapshot of, there's so many projects and policies that have changed in between now and then, but that leads us to here. And so now this planned Ferndale portion project is a good time to reflect on that. So some of you, I think, have been to planning commission meetings recently and in the past, and a lot of times it's sort of an environment that usually it's, or not usually, but sometimes it is someone's first time coming to that meeting where they're reacting to a project and trying to see where they can fit in this development process. And so really that is a good spot to contribute and talk about specific projects. But now is a very important time as well. So every 5 years is when communities in Michigan typically look at their master plans and update them. And so this is a great time for you all to be here. So I really appreciate you attending this meeting and hopefully future ones. But so the city, there are limitations of where the city government can influence development. A lot of times it's through publicly owned land. A lot of it, other times it's when there are tax incentives, financial incentives involved. And so that leads to policies like zoning, which are actual legal ordinances where development projects need to adhere to those specific standards. And so zoning is connected to the master plan and sets the stage for zoning changes. So there's a sort of a proactive and reactive connection between all of these policies and actual development. So hopefully, these the proactive approach is really setting a boundary on the types of projects you will allow in a community. So building in within that policy framework through the master plan and zoning ordinance, those build in community values along the way. And so proactively as the city with those documents in hand, there's also opportunities where city staff meets with developers and applicants before they actually apply and submit something. So staff is always trying to build in those community values and talk about the master plan, talk about things that have been happening at planning commission meeting to give different property owners when they're proposing a project some basis on in ways that they can improve their project and hopefully engage with their neighbors around their project is what we always encourage. And then, there's sort of the reactive side as well. So I mentioned some of those other past development projects where, we were able to react, and once something is on paper or being built, that's when you can also say, okay, well, potentially that zoning ordinance, there's ways that we may want to amend that to further, include those community values and maybe fix a portion of a project that, maybe had a consequence that wasn't intended. So projects that meet each of those rules and go through all those steps. Some folks here have been to those public hearings at Planning Commission and City Council, and often Planning Commission is where those site plans are approved based on the ordinances we have at the time. So this is a perfect time to kind of evaluate what those values are and build those into the master plan, which leads to potentially some zoning updates for future development. Next slide, please. So as I said, these are just a snapshot of, when it comes to development, here's what the city has from an implementation toolkit perspective. So we've got our plans and policies. So you see the master plan there from 2017, the Parks and Recreation Plan, as well as the Ferndale Moves Mobility Plan that was just updated, and the City Council Strategic Plan. So all of those plans tie together for some plans and policies that give people something to expect. The master plans in most communities, such as ours, includes sort of a guide for future land use development based on community values, as I said, but also recent development and where maybe a city would like to incentivize certain types of uses. There's also, as I mentioned, the zoning regulations. So this is just a snapshot of an old zoning map, but the zoning map and regulations in the ordinance are those specific laws that sort of guide development and give the city ways to shape that. And so what a lot of this leads up to is hopefully a predictable and streamlined process, not just for people that are trying to develop a project, but also for community members that want to participate. So this is a sort of a snapshot of an old development guide that could be updated as part of this master plan process. But the goal is really to incorporate as many of the community's priorities into regular zoning to create a predictable process for all. There are tools in the zoning ordinance allowed by the state of Michigan that allows for projects that sometimes may not fit the exact box of a zoning ordinance. So one tool that has been part of some recent projects that have gone through the Planning Commission City Council is a planned unit development, or PUD, as we've talked about in the past. But it gives the developer, the city, the community flexibility to negotiate zoning standards if projects meet certain community benefits that are substantial. And so some of those are noted in the zoning ordinance, and some of those things are things that staff really would like to talk through with the community in this process. You'll probably hear us say, the term trade-offs quite a bit throughout this presentation, but it is part of development, I think, anywhere, not just Ferndale, but it does, put the community in a position of making tough choices between big priorities. Really, we will need to make tough decisions about priorities in our projects and initiatives. So everything from climate action to parks and affordable housing and mobility. Different buildings and different sites are sort of unique and have different, pieces to them that lend themselves to certain types of developments, as well as other tools where, like, regulations and incentives and education that go along with these things, but are definitely part of the trade-offs when you're looking at an overall project.
Yeah, and how that scale changes too. So different things that Justin, can you mute yourself for a sec? Thanks. So when we're thinking about what we can regulate as a community at the citywide scale, how we can regulate things differently at the district scale, and more importantly, how those apply at each building and site scale. So with that, we're going to dive in a little bit more into some of these trade-offs. So for the purposes of today's session, we couldn't get into all of those topics. Doesn't mean we're not worrying about them during this plan, but for our discussion purposes today, we narrowed things down into these 4 topics. And so when it comes to breaking up shortly into our discussion groups via breakout rooms, these are the 4 that we're going to use, but we know that there are other things. So first of all, what we'd love is for you in the chat. It looks like Alex dropped us a little prompt in there. Of these 4 topics, what is your highest priority from these topics? So again, they're affordable housing, character, or like the design and look and feel of a development, parking, mobility and access, or stormwater and green space. Got a couple of affordable housing dropping into the chat. Go ahead, we'll give you a couple seconds to do this. Character, affordable housing, stormwater, green space, stormwater and green space, affordable housing, character. Come on, someone's got to get excited about parking. Character and quality of life. Mobility, there we go, parking, affordable housing and stormwater. Character, affordable housing. We'll figure out some way to tally these up. It's interesting to see. Character and height of buildings, yep. Mobility and access, stormwater, good mix of things. Character, that's why we moved here. Can't wait to hear how you define what the best character is. Affordable housing and parking. Stormwater, less concrete. Where does accessibility for people with disabilities fit in? In all of these things. So that's one of our overarching goals, is being accessible. And so we will want to hear about how that all of these different topics, how those needs are being met for all those different user groups that Alex was mentioning, of people with different abilities, people with different income levels, people of different family size and makeup. So all of these, we're just trying to break apart what goes into development But all of those overarching goals and values that we identified earlier are embedded into all of this. Character, vibrant, and active communities. Awesome. I'm just, for the sake of time, going to move on. What's missing? So here are the 4 again that we're going to be talking about today. What other priorities you want to make sure we know? Does character include addressing the diversity of interest of the residents? Sort of. It's more about focused on the development today, so it's more about what that development looks like. But we definitely are going to be covering people quality of life. Yep. When you say that these topics come up again and again, where do they come up? So these are topics that come up often during planning commission meetings, and when new developments come in, and when there are community meetings around planned unit development proposals or development proposals. Diversity, surveillance over policing, equity. Again, equity is an underlying, think of that as permeating all of these topics. Peace and quiet. What else? Commercial versus houses. That you will be able to talk about that today. That's that land use mix. Walkability, yeah. That definitely comes up. Green space, yeah. Sustainable infrastructure. Stormwater, green space is just our shorthand. Sustainable infrastructure is the definite underlying topic for stormwater and green space. We're just trying to use shorthand. Community versus bureaucratic orientation. Policing citizens oversight committee, okay. We are going to have an expert on some of those topics tomorrow during the equitable open space topic as well. An expanded sense of community, who belongs, and racial diversity is an important topic. Absolutely. That is a cornerstone of Ferndale's identity, and we are excited to hear how that can manifest itself, all these different identities in the physical space that goes into new development and redevelopment and preserving what's important to you. So definitely chime in on those topics when we get to our discussion groups. So with that, I just kind of wanted to use this as an example for Justin to kind of chime in as a recent development process. Planning for aging in place. That's a great segue, Quinn, into this topic. Justin, do you want to kind of share just a little bit about how the Parkdale Towns project kind of evolved from start to finish, and some of the things we heard from the community, and why we want to use that as kind of a launching point for our discussions today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So this particular project was sort of unique in that it was, I think, formerly a school site adjacent to a city park. And so, it was something where the schools had, sold to a development team, and I'm simplifying that very much so, but anyway, and then the development team kind of proposed a project that the Planning Commission and City Council could consider. And so there was a lot of talk about, is this too dense? What is the, density that's appropriate here? The look and feel of the project. So concerns about traffic being right adjacent to 8 Mile. What does the landscaping of the project look like? What is the architectural design of the project, and how would this fit in with the neighboring community? And so there, many meetings about this particular project, a lot of really good conversations that I feel like came out of it. And I think the project ended up changing quite a bit from what was initially proposed. But this was one of those projects where there was a lot of talk at the Planning Commission and City Council about the trade-offs of development. And so, what's the appropriate mix of parking on site? The site was vacant for a bit of time, and so there's trade-offs with that obviously as well. There was a little bit of confusion about green space, and so how much there was, because of the park that was adjacent nearby, so there was a little bit of confusion about what was park space versus what was school property. the Planning Commission and community wanted to make sure that it was still a walkable project and that there were open green spaces as part of it. And so this was one of those projects where it was a planned unit development application. So a rezoning in effect that also had to provide some community benefits. And so there were open space pathways that connected Fielding Street to Garber Park and things like that. And so I think that this project is just about wrapped up, but we heard a lot throughout the project about there not being accessible units in this particular project. This project happened before the city's inclusive housing policy. And so there was a higher price point because there was a reduction in the number of units. And so it seemed like a good example of trade-offs, balancing priorities. But Jordan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think that was kind of where we landed through a lot of meetings that we talked about on this project.
No, Justin, I think you covered it really well. I think one of the things that we tried to do, because this project did seek tax incentives, was balance what we heard in the Planning Commission meeting with what the developers were willing to absorb, and then also taking into account the other factor that this being a school's property and the school's goal of selling it and having it redeveloped to create more homes, more families in the community. We tried to juggle all of that. And basically the output that was approved was the result of all those negotiations.
Here's my unmute. Awesome. Thanks for that. Just quick background. So as we get moving along, just a reminder that we're going to be opening up to 4 different discussion groups momentarily. And we're really excited to hear from all of you about what's working, where there are challenges, and how best to move forward. We're just at the very beginning of a master planning process. This is one means of input that we're garnering. We're going to have a lot more reaching out and getting people's opinions from as wide a sector as we can across the community. So we wanted to just set the stage on these 4 topics a little bit through the lens of what the city has been doing, what we think are some strategies that could be part of your discussion coming up shortly. So we're just going to quickly give an overview to help guide those discussions momentarily. So when it comes to affordable housing, the city recently completed the Equitable, community, inclusivity, and equitable housing action plan, some version of that as an acronym, after passing a resolution a few years prior to have a policy affirming equitable and inclusive housing throughout this process. So these are just some quick snippets from that process. Hopefully some of you participated in that or were aware of what was going on with that. But so how that process defined affordable and inclusive housing is that there are options throughout the city of Ferndale for people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and all income levels. When we say for people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and all income levels, we include people of all ages, races, ethnicities, abilities, sexual orientations, and gender expressions. So this is how through that process this was defined, and definitely check out the website on the city's website and look for that inclusive housing study to hear more about that, particularly what's in that plan. It's got some great stuff in there. We wanted to recognize the history that our predecessors made in the planning, real estate development, policymaking fields. So there's a lot of issues that need to be affirmatively and deliberately changed in the future. So years ago and continuing into today, there has been discrimination related to land use policy development that has purposefully excluded people of different races and of different ethnic backgrounds and of different economic backgrounds. And Ferndale affirmatively supports breaking down those barriers and doing our best to try and remedy what has been decades upon decades, centuries of oppression in how decisions are made and how we treat the land in the United States. And a big portion of that is still embedded in our zoning. And so if you really are interested in this topic, definitely check out Segregated by Design. It's a 16-minute clip that kind of gives a good overview to this. But what it describes is how the insurance companies worked together with the federal government on deciding who could get mortgages in which neighborhoods and who could get the insurance that they needed to support buying homes. And different neighborhoods had deed restrictions on who could live there. While we have since passed the Fair Housing Act in the 60s, our work is not done. And as part of that, and as part of this process, we want to actively affirm through the city's anti-racism statement and policy from last year. There have been conversations since then on the non-inclusive practices related to zoning and other land use policies. So this is an ongoing dialogue, and we want to make sure that there's an understanding that it's not okay, and how we think about housing and single family only specific housing that has historically excluded people from different communities. As you can see on this map, you've probably heard the term redlining before. You can literally see on this map of the Metro Detroit area how Royal Oak Township and Hazel Park and portions of Ferndale were redlined. Those red areas were deemed not as eligible for the same level of mortgages, insurance, things like that, that were meant to exclude Black people from the other colored areas, the yellow, blue, and green areas. So with that kind of as a baseline for how we're approaching equity and inclusion related to housing, again, this affordability and inclusive housing action plan is an awesome resource that the city has, and we're using that to help frame our conversation in the master plan. And the trend is that Ferndale is built out, and it says there are not that many vacant parcels left in the city. The trends are that incomes are going up, which means housing costs are going up. But generally our household size is going down from smaller families, fewer children, fewer school-age children, particularly in Ferndale, and seniors who want to age in place. And so because of that, housing is at a crisis moment, both in Ferndale and nationwide right now. But particular to what we want to hear from you is, where are those needs most present, and what are some of the solutions, and how do we work towards alleviating some of that pressure to preserve the historic housing stock that's in the city, your neighborhoods that you love, your homes, making sure that we can try to come up with some solutions to try to alleviate some of that pressure. So the city has been up to a variety of methods and trying to implement things related to affordable housing, requiring any new development that comes in that receives city incentives has to provide 30% of new units to be affordable. That action plan I mentioned, the inclusive housing policy from 2017, and the past master plan was pretty aggressive on this front as well. It's going to take a long time to get this to where we need it to be, but let's figure out what some of those priorities are for the next 5 years to really elevate the next phase, what's going to be showing up on our list 5 years from now, and what Ferndale is already doing. So when you get into the discussion sections, we'd love to hear more about what some of those possible solutions might be that are shown here. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Alex on character.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start with some quotes that, we pulled from the previous master plan, but just highlighting, this definition of what is character. When we think about character, it's things like building design and materials, the placement of a building, its scale, architectural diversity, representing both the past and the present. Context sensitive, so that the solutions and what character means and what's the right character is not going to be the same for every single place across the community. Looking at the street itself and what is the character of that street. Thinking about things like lighting, sidewalks, landscaping, signage, public art. And really a goal coming out of the previous master plan effort was, to create this kind of vision and narrative to help guide proactively future developers so that we can be proactive rather than reactive in terms of responding to development. And then the next slide is just kind of giving some more visuals, and this is content that you will see in our discussion boards to help prompt that conversation, giving some definition about what is architectural style, facade composition. So the way that these elements within a facade come together, you know, we all know when we like something or don't like something, but there is kind of this science and art behind why we have a preference for certain things, thinking about the design of the facade, also the pedestrian realm. So all of those other things outside the building, like street trees and lights and places to sit and landscaping. Also talking about massing and scale, which a lot of that is handled in zoning in terms of kind of the bulk and size and height and setbacks of buildings that envelope. But you know, definitely more things to explore about where things are important or not. And we also welcome other ideas to defining what character is specifically for Ferndale. And why do we need it? I think you probably all have your own reasons why character is important, but here's some just to kind of think about and spark a conversation. It's about kind of preserving the past, preserving a culture, preserving historical events. It's about being welcoming and inviting, supporting kind of local identity, that like feeling that it's not a big box store. It's kind of a local brand and feel that each neighborhood has its own authentic identity itself. And so how do we protect and enhance that? And what is the impact on neighbors? It is really important. I think a lot of that fits into the buckets of massing and scale, but that's really the point of the conversation here, is how we make space for quality development moving forward. And just the last slide on character is some of the things that the city is already doing in terms of, again, we said public art as being something that is defining character and enhancing character. We have architectural standards for downtowns and our corridors. Also looking at kind of the building materials and architectural compatibility and zoning. The DDA has also been doing some studies of the downtown and that kind of urban environment and looking for opportunities. And also when we look at tax incentives and how we tie financial incentives to the quality of a design as well, there are opportunities there. So continue to have those conversations about, you know, what are we willing to do in order to get it? Who do we need to support as we move forward? And then I think the next one is parking, mobility, and access.
Thanks, Alex. So if you want to go to the next slide, Kathleen. So I think, you know, as being somebody who's in all of the planning commission meetings, you know, parking comes up quite often. And, you know, it is something that, you know, our region talks about quite often. So I think that what the last master plan had talked about, and you know, recent plans like the Ferndale mobility plan have been talking about balancing the different needs of different transportation modes. So you know, obviously there are automobiles, you know, a big part of, you know, Michigan culture in general. But if we are going to make some real strides towards supporting our climate action goals as a community, greenhouse gas reductions and limiting those impervious surfaces are something that, you know, we can make an impact locally. Parking is really always going to be a challenge, is what I think I've taken from all those meetings, and that's, you know, that is just the nature of development projects, and that's okay. I think it's just important to talk about you know, why that is and how we can balance things as some of those trade-offs that we mentioned. So the last master plan talked a lot about reducing parking requirements for residential uses to support potentially you know, building more affordable housing. We know as the city from building a parking development, that mixed use parking development, that it is very expensive to build parking. So, you know, if a goal is really decreasing emissions and prioritizing energy efficient transportation options, as was noted in the Ferndale Move's most recent plan, you know, what can we do to support that type of goal? But we do know, as I said, you know, as a region, you know, there are parking needs. So from an economics perspective, accommodating visitors and being convenient for businesses, that, you know, has been important. Limiting impacts on neighborhoods is something that, you know, is part of the equation as well. And if you have this sort of shared system for parking, you know, it is possible to reduce asphalt. I think if anyone looks at a overhead view of, you know, just even downtown Ferndale, the amount of asphalt is quite surprising. So couldn't we have less of it? This is just a snapshot of a, you know, greenhouse gas emissions per person per trip. And when we're all in single occupancy vehicles, that's pretty substantial. Obviously, some of those examples in that photo, we don't necessarily have light rail running down through downtown Ferndale. So there are limitations on options in our region, but how, as Ferndale residents, businesses, how can we make our own impact? So I won't dwell on these too much, but there have been a few projects that did come to mind when we were talking about this subject that have came through the Planning Commission. And so a lot of them have to do with parking requirements. And so, you know, this is more of to share, you know, just thinking about different options with these projects. So this first project you may be familiar with. There's been various proposals for it over the years, and there's been various, you know, retail type tenants over the years. But at Marshall and La Prairie, in a mixed use zone district, there was a proposal for a brewery. There was a proposal for a carry out sort of you know, market type concept, and everything that kept coming up was there is no on-site parking. A lot of the parking on street is focused on is really taken up by a lot of the existing users there, but a lot of neighbors at these meetings have talked about, you know, we would love to see some sort of active use in this building. So you know, it would be good from a sustainability perspective to reuse a vacant site, and you know, it has kind of a cool character, probably from, you know, Ferndale's early days, and it is walkable, but there's not much green space, and so, you know, that's a situation where parking was very much part of this conversation, because there's no way for them to make parking essentially there. What are the trade-offs that go with that if you just stick with the minimum parking requirements that we have? Next slide. So more recently downtown, there was this recent proposal for Vester Flats, which had it met the city's community's affordable housing minimums, reusing sort of a site that is just completely pavement. It would provide some green stormwater infrastructure, some walkable commercial space downtown. The proposal for redoing the alley, widening the alley, and providing some incentives and concepts that would make it a little bit more walkable. But there's not a lot of existing parking. All the existing parking on site would likely go away. So from a character perspective, it meets a lot of the building material requirements for downtown with a lot of brick, but it is a privately owned site that is used for public parking. So that's something where, it meets some goals of affordable housing and those other criteria I mentioned, but it would take away from some parking downtown. We heard from a lot of businesses and residents. The developer heard from them, and Planning Commission heard from them about, the downside to that from their perspective. So, it's not just downtown, but also outside of downtown where these projects are proposed, where parking frequently is a trade-off.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick up on that, Justin, and thinking about the R3 district, which is a residential zoning district where there have been some rebuilds recently, and thinking about, this is very conceptual, just what would happen in the R3 district, what kind of housing can get built there with the current parking standards, and thinking about, this is in plan view, looking at 3 different lots if they were combined, which a version of this happened recently with some townhouses. But what would happen if a small little 12-unit apartment building, not dissimilar to that apartment building that was shown earlier in the character section, Now you're required to provide a certain number of parking spaces. So if this was a 12-unit apartment building, the trade-off is 20 spaces of parking. So would this be a desired outcome, I think, with parking being almost the same footprint as the building itself? Or if a corner lot in a neighborhood in the R3 district wanted to build 4 attached townhouses, or even 1-story, there's some like this 1-story attached ranch style houses in the city. With the current parking standards, you couldn't physically meet them on site, and so if 7 spaces are required, you can only physically fit 4 in there. So some of them is okay for them to be met with on-street parking as well. So when you're in that discussion, thinking about parking, think about what's more important, having a place for people to park off street, or is it more important to have, buildings? All of those we don't have the answers, and we're curious what you think. And then city-owned lots. So from the Inclusive Housing Action Plan, it said thinking about prioritizing city lots. So this is an example of, we were testing the downtown zoning. This is the extreme maximum that could happen on that site. It likely would not develop this way, but it's testing that. How do you, when things that are easiest for a community to get redeveloped are when they're owned by the city, and the city has the most control over what happens there. So if the parking lot between City Hall and the library were to redevelop, it could redevelop with some storefronts down here on the bottom. It could have the remainder of the site maintaining that parking like there is now on the first floor, with 2 more stories of parking above, and then 2 more stories of housing on top of that. So you could meet several of those different trade-offs on this site, but is that what we want to see? What do you want to see on other city-owned sites? Not all of them are just a parking lot like this downtown. The city has other opportunities for redevelopment. When things redevelop, what should they redevelop into? So some things that have happened, I think, with the new parking structure on the west side, that has been challenging to some of the neighbors. We acknowledge that. I think it's been able to help ameliorate some of the parking demand on the west side of downtown. Like we've mentioned, the transit-oriented development ordinance for along Woodward to kind of concentrate development on Woodward, where it might have less of an impact than it would in the neighborhoods. Encourage shared parking, encouraging and going so far as to require bicycle parking and electric vehicle parking in new developments coming in. What are some other things? What are some other things related to parking and access that we should know about? What should the city prioritize? So with that, we're just going to wrap up here with Justin on stormwater and green space and get the breakout rooms started.
Thanks, Kathleen. If you want to go to the next slide. I'm not sure if everyone who's attending is aware, but there are specific green space stormwater goals that have been in past plans that, I think really are going to be a cornerstone of this plan. But why would we have those goals? So increasing the tree canopy. There's certain areas of town I could think of, maybe portions of Southeast Ferndale and some of the industrial districts where there's no trees. It's just asphalt and warehouses or and that sort of thing. So trees help with stormwater management. We know that also, can help with public health and character of a place. New developments right now in the city do manage stormwater on site. They're required to have some underground and other systems that go with that. Based on some things that are happening regionally, how should we relook at some of those stormwater requirements? Creating a stronger network of green stormwater infrastructure. So below here's a picture of a bioswale that a couple of them were put in on West Marshall Street. And so, is that something that we should continue as the city and help limit some of that asphalt and redirecting stormwater to slow it from going into the city system, including requiring private open space and developments. We've started doing that. Maybe there should be more. Including some of the schools into our network of green spaces. So what can Ferndale do with, I think we have also just, I guess I would mention too, supporting non-motorized transit is something that's been a priority for years in the community. in helping with stormwater goals. So what is Ferndale already doing? So I mentioned some of the zoning ordinance requirements for private open area. We do have a tree replacement protection ordinance that comes with the tree replacement fund that we updated as part of the last master plan. You can actually click on that link there and take a look at the tree canopy study that was done and how DPW tracks new trees planted with some of the volunteer plantings and new developments that have happened recently. Development standards or low development standards and stormwater management I mentioned as well. But the zoning ordinance also has some landscape and tree requirements that were updated a few years ago. I think somebody in the chat mentioned permeable pavers, and that is, something that I think that could be part of future project, has been part of a few projects recently, but something more we can look at. I mentioned the bioswales, and then really, stormwater in Ferndale is a big deal. But also, how can we connect better with our neighbors in the region? And really, it is something system-wide as a region that we can do our part, but how are we connecting with our neighbors and making sure that they're contributing as well?
Okay, so we received a lot of information just now. Thank you, Justin, Alex, Kathleen, for that deep download. And thank you everyone for all the comments that you're putting in the chat. So as we go into the breakout session where we get to talk about all of these items, let's just go over some rules of engagement. So you can go to the next slide. So this will take a minute, but if we can all abide by these rules of engagement, I think we can have a really great discussion. So first of all, take space, make space. What that means is we want to hear your voice, so make yourself heard. However, we want to make space for other people to speak, especially those who maybe this is their first time meeting. Maybe people are a little bit shy. Maybe people just want to give feedback in the chat. But all that to say, when you're giving comments, think, am I the only one talking here, or have I been talking for the past 10 minutes? So you want to make space for other people to let their voice be heard. Additionally, we're thinking about productive conversations that address issues and not people. So what are your issues with the plan? What are your dreams for the plan versus your issues with a specific person, or your dreams for a specific person? So really, let's think about productive solutions that are focused on the plan. And with that, don't be rude. Going on to the next topic, we're asking you to listen carefully and deeply. So we really want to hear your thoughts, and we already know that you're already listening really carefully and thinking about what you want to say. Next, don't freeze each other in time. Allow others and ourselves to change and grow. And so I want to ask us to allow the city to do that as well. So sometimes when we're in these meetings, there's this moment where you think, the city did this and I'm mad, and they'll always do that. So what if we came into these discussions thinking about evolution and the opportunity for the city of Ferndale to evolve with you, as well as anyone who is giving feedback. Allow people to change and grow. Next, challenge oppressive remarks and behaviors, but not blame or shame. I want to say, let's not go too far with this. This is not about challenging each other. But if people are saying something oppressive, you're probably actually going to get booted out of the meeting. But if that doesn't happen, let's try to challenge those things, but we're not going to blame and shame people. Number 6, let's practice both and thinking. So versus this is the only solution and this is the only way to go about it. How about we think, yes, this solution and this solution, or this dream as well as this dream. Number 7, if a statement has already been made, feel free to utilize the time to explore new issues and opportunities. Meaning we want to hear a lot from you, so we don't need to just harp on the same thing that someone has already said, unless you want to add and advance that conversation further. Number 8, let's look for solutions and productivity. This plan is really about taking Ferndale forward into the future. And so we really want to hear from you so we can develop solutions to some of the issues that are at hand. Next, expect and accept some discomfort and unfinished business. This is just the beginning of a much longer process. So not everything's going to get finished today. We're just starting out. Number 10, I kind of alluded to this, but we're all adults, but any sort of shenanigans that's rude or any of that Zoom bombing will result in you getting booted out the menu. But that's not going to happen because we're all here to progressively move Ferndale forward. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Alex. Just a quick reminder to all of the facilitators: when you go into your room, you have to hit record to make sure that we're still recording. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. So you are going to get broken up into rooms randomly for the breakouts, but don't fret, we're all going into the same place. So we want to encourage you to start with the discussion that's aligned with your group, but then we can create time and space to talk about the other three topics as well. And we will leave these boards open through tomorrow at least, just to let you, if you would like to go back and add some additional comments. So when you get into the board, I think the link Kathleen is dropping into the chat right now. Group 1, you're going to look for Kathleen. Group 2, you're going to look for me on character. Group 3, Jordan, you'll talk about parking, mobility, and access to start. And then group 4, stormwater and green space. So I just wanted to have a couple slides for those of you who are not familiar with the mural board. So first, you can add your name or you can join anonymously. You'll show up as a little animal character once you click in. So then once you join, you should see this screen here on the right. Before you enter, you might see some helpful hints, just to let you know that I've dropped all these slides right here in the right side of the mural board. So if you forget, all the groups are labeled, find your group number. The next slide just looks at that toolbar that's along the left. You can just double click to do a sticky note, but you can also go up to the toolbar. There's also icons. You can do thumbs up, thumbs down, all different things, as well as even so far as to include images. So no, you do not have to download anything. You can just tap the link. It's a visitor link, so you won't even have to sign up at all. And I think there's just one last slide on how to use the mural. And so we did provide some sticky notes and some push pins and thumbs up within close proximity to the boards as well. So I think without further ado, we can break up into our groups. And we will see you all on the other side. And don't worry, you can't mess anything up. So feel free to play. I'm not sure who is gonna launch the breakouts though. Oh, looks like we're going.
Hey, Justin, I think you have to enter into room 4 or enter into a room, and then I'll move you to your room.
Okay.
So yeah, if you haven't clicked enter into your room yet, I'll assign you to, if you're a scribe, or I'll move you around to your appropriate room if you're one of the co-hosts.
And then Augusta, is there any way to get screen sharing, or who will be having the mural board up for people?
I think that will be up to the co-host or the host of the facilitator to do that.
That would be me, but I can't share my
Oh.
screen. It says participant has disabled.
Okay, let's see about that.
Because it originally put me to breakout room 1, and then I was told I was in the wrong room, so they threw me here.
Okay, hold on, Jordan, let's see where you're from.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm like seeing all the boards. That's very weird.
So Greg, what you want to do while Augusta's kind of figuring that out, what you want to do is you can zoom in. So like if you have a mouse, you can kind of scroll to zoom in.
Yeah.
Or you can use, and so, 'cause yeah, you'll see all of them. What you want to do is you want to scroll to the topic of your or I'm sorry, that's based on the room. So
Yeah, I
this
don't know how to
room-
get to a room. All I'm seeing are all 4.
Yeah, so I think you need to like because I'm not seeing your names. I'm not seeing your names in, I'm wondering, did you get
I got a pop-up window that said, did I want to join to something? And I clicked it, and then all the people started disappearing and only
Right.
you were left.
so you should have clicked that, because now oh, Jordan, I see you. Are you not, you haven't joined the room.
I apologize. How do I do that? Because I thought I was in the room right now.
You're in the main room, so you need to be in room 1. Let me move you to room 2, and then I'm gonna move you to, I'm gonna move you to room 2, and then we'll try to move you back to room 1. So,
When you say
I'm sorry,
room, do you
room
mean
3,
group?
room 3.
When you say room, do you mean group?
Group, yeah. So
Okay.
Jordan, are you gonna move? There we go. Okay. Let's see, okay, and then Councilman Greg, let's see where you are. Okay, let's see. Councilman Greg, do you have a preference of rooms? Oh, can I put you in room 3? They're a little low on numbers. Is that cool?
Sure.
Okay, thanks so much. Hey, Christina, welcome to, we're just entering into the breakout room. So I'm gonna assign you into one of those rooms. You can just hop right in. One of the facilitators will welcome you in. Two. Hmm.
Hello? Oh. Okay, I'm not sure. It's so.
Thanks.
Excuse me?
The groups are wrapping up and everybody will join us here in a moment.
Okay. Second group.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Welcome back all.
Yeah. Oh,
Who just put that group one discussion was great in the chat?
That's because we're all great.
Tommy, thank you, Tommy.
I think you did a great job as keeping us in line, you guys.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's a lot of topics, right, team? Like, and we know that this is just a small sampling of people in the city. So we really appreciate you all chiming in. Any other big takeaways from any of our facilitators? Go ahead and put them in the chat. I think we wish we could have covered all of the topics with all of you, but you can see how complicated each of them are and that there's so much more beyond those 4 topics as well. It looks like we've got some members from the DDA board here tonight as well. I want to recognize them and some planning commissioners and some council people and some city staff. If any of those people want to wave and emote with an emoji of some kind, we just that we know who you all are with your little, there we go. Lena's got a little firecracker.
And don't forget steering committee.
Steering committee. Lynn is a very strong, helpful member of that. A lot of our people are double dutying. So I hope this was useful. I think, again, it's just a glimpse into starting to get the input from all of you. And I hope that you will know that we'll keep this mural board open for the next day or so that you can finish those other 2 sections if you want. We got through 1 and 2-ish almost in ours. I don't know about the other groups, but anyone else from the other 3 sessions want to jump in real quick on how many, or hold up a 1, 2-ish?
We mostly just talked.
Well, that's great. So play around in mural. Like we said, we're going to translate this to an online survey so that everyone else can participate that wasn't here tonight. Definitely tell your friends about planferndale.com. Join us tomorrow. We're going to have a discussion about equitable open space from 3 to 5 and climate action from 6 to 8. Again, we will record those sessions if you can't make it. We will upload the slides. We will get everything up on the website. We're gonna have to change some things for tomorrow's session, so those slides aren't finalized yet based on today. We invite you to join the discussion board as well and continue the conversation there with your peers and friends. Some great comments have been happening in the chat. We appreciate it. Yes, it will be posted on the website. So the discussion board, if you go to planferndale.com, scroll down to the page where it says join the discussion here. We couldn't embed it, unfortunately, into the city's website, Kate. So that's the mural board. And then here's Justin has posted in the chat the discussion board, planferndale.discussion.community. stay tuned. Like we said, the online Parks and Rec survey is going to be going live momentarily. We've got one more round of approvals on those questions to go out. Any other closing thoughts from from Ryan or anyone at this, Justin or Jordan?
I'll just say thanks, everybody.
I will echo what Jordan said. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate it. There's multiple ways to participate, so hopefully we'll keep everybody engaged throughout. But again, thanks for spending the time with us on your Tuesday night.
I'll just say one thanks as well. And there were so many great comments and people really want to dive deep. I just want to highlight that the city does have opportunities for you to have individual feedback or group feedback sessions in which you can discuss your priorities in more depth. So just go to the website and look for more ways to plug in there.
Thank you everyone for being so kind and courteous. I think it's really exciting, all the energy that everyone has for the city, and we're really excited to be helping you on this. And I just hope that you'll continue to spread the word and remain transparent with your peers. Thanks to the steering committee. Got to give them some love. Thank you to everyone who's participating. We're just beginning the process. So now is the time to jump in and continue to share.
And I just want to say, as I volunteered for the steering committee, and I was one of those angry residents at a lot of planning commission meetings. And I think this is really wonderful. And it's changed my perspective on what our city does and how we move forward. So thank you guys.
Cheers to that, Lynn. Thanks. I think it's hard. It's hard to be a resident and not pay attention to everything that's happening at City Hall and to realize how much is going on and what the city's doing and trying. And we can't make everything perfect. And I hope that this is an opportunity to like reset for 5 new years. Hopefully this time in 5 years, we'll be able to be in person and safe and celebrating some great new success. And I saw someone was saying meow. I definitely have a couple friends here, Oscar and Toby, that are honorary members today of our discussion. So any other closing thoughts?
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Stay tuned to planferndale.com.
Have a good night.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Have a good